All right, JoeyRitter.com, on Twitter at Joey Ritter. I am very excited about my guest today. We got Brian Propp, left winger from the Philadelphia Flyers, Hall of Famer. Brian, it's a pleasure and an honor to have you on. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, my pleasure, Joey. It'll be fun to chat a little bit here.
Yeah, now, I promise I've got some fantastic questions for you, but I do need to mention that this is my 50th episode. So we've hit a big landmark here on JoeyRitter.com, and I'm very excited. I didn't think it would get past episode 2, and we're at episode 50. So thank you for being the 50th guest.
Oh, that's great.
So the big guffaw celebration, one of the better celebrations in Philadelphia sports history. But obviously, there had to be a first time for it. Do you recall which year you pulled that out for the first time?
That was in the middle 80s because Howie Mandel used to have his comedic show in Atlantic City every summer, and I used to go with Scott McKay, one of my best friends. And during his show, he did the guffaw. He said, "Hey, you guys want to mess up the next comedian?" And everyone's like, "What's that? How do we do that?" And he says, "When they say something funny, don't clap, cheer, or whistle. Just do guffaw, guffaw. Wouldn't that be guffunny?" And I thought that was kind of cool, so I ended up doing that during the summertime. My friend Scott McKay was on the Ocean City Beach Patrol, and I'd go to him and say guffaw rather than hello. And I thought, hey, that's kind of cool. I thought I needed something the next year to express my excitement after I scored goals that I was going to continue with the guffaw. So that was probably about 1986 or 1987.
Now, okay, 86, 87. When you skated back to the bench, did some of your teammates kind of go to you and be like, "What the hell was that?" Or did it just go over well from the start?
I think at the start, everyone was sort of surprised because after I did the guffaw on the way back to center ice, I came to the bench and the coach came over and was like, "What was that? Don't ever do that again." And I was like, well, I still enjoyed it, and I scored another goal in that game, and I continued with a guffaw, but never heard much from the coach after that. But it took a little while for my teammates and even for other teams to even notice that I was doing it, because it wasn't something that I did right after I scored a goal. It was heading back towards center ice.
Right. Now, I assume you have seen the 24/7 series on HBO that the Flyers were featured in 2010 up to the Winter Classic. So my question to you is, if that series existed back in the mid-'80s for those Flyers teams, who would be the most interesting guy to be profiled off ice, you think?
I think probably, the former Brad McCrimmon was always full of a lot of energy and was one of the team leaders that always had a lot of things that he had the team attending off ice, and also had a lot of great stories. So I think he probably would have been the most colorful guy.
That's a great answer, and he's obviously sorely missed. Now, speaking of HBO documentaries, there was one that came out for the Broad Street Bullies. And it was ironically when the Flyers came back 3-0 in the Boston series on the road to the Stanley Cup. But I'm watching that series, and the mid-'70s Flyers team, they'd play a game and then they'd go, drink with the fans over in New Jersey. And then, you fast forward to today's game and diet and exercise, and, I'm assuming that the players are not going to the bar and stuff these days. But you kind of played in that time period that bridged that gap. Did the coach and training staff, talk to the team about that kind of behavior?
I think at that point it was pretty much the same all around the NHL, where the players would go for a bite to eat and a couple of beer after a game, and it just happened that they would have fans that would be going to the specific spots, and the Flyers players used to head to Rexy's because that was on their way home for a lot of the players and their wives. And people got to know that, so they used to go there, and they found out that the hockey guys are just regular guys and enjoyed, spending time with their fans. And they still do to this day. And I think that today's players might be more worried about maybe the media and people with cell phones taking pictures and saying, "Hey, there's a guy, he's having a beer," or something like that. But I do believe that, the players today still go out. They do mingle with the fans, and I think that's still very important for the fans in your city. And as a result, I think that a lot of fans ended up getting to know the players better and would continue to buy season tickets.
And it was a good thing. But what I'm saying is, towards like the late '80s, mid '90s, did the coaching staff and trainers say, don't go to the bar, don't drink during the season?
I think that that's a little difficult to do because every once in a while, if you have a beer or two after a game, it's not going to hurt you. You're in such fabulous shape as it is. You're watching your diet, your nutrition. An occasional glass of wine or a couple of beers is not going to hurt anybody. So it wasn't that they said you can't go out and have a drink. It's just that I think that the players understood that the money was getting better in the game, and they had to look after themselves a lot better physically and mentally, and as a result, probably a little bit less drinking that was going on later in the 80s.
Gotcha, and I'm sure maybe you made up for it in the off season. Now, there's two players in particular that I wanted to ask you about that you played with, and obviously your rookie year, you came into the league and you were playing with Bobby Clark. I imagine there's no better player to come into the league and learn from. Is there anything specific that you took away from playing with him?
First of all, he was one of the best leaders in the history of the NHL. And to be a true leader, he found a way to make sure that everybody around him was better, and that he would support the players and make them feel like they really were needed. And I've heard stories from a lot of players that he played with that he constantly was able to communicate with them how much they were needed on the team. And it takes a great leader to be able to not talk about himself that much, but to be able to pump other players up to make them better. So Bob Clark was a great role model for me. He worked as hard in practice as he did in games. That's the way I played junior hockey in the Western Hockey League, where he played, and I was the same type of player in practice and in games, and tried to be that consistent player. So I think that I wasn't overwhelmed by his leadership. I just learned from it, and when he retired, I tried to carry that on.
Sure. Okay. Now that makes sense given the type of player you were. Now, the other guy that I want to ask you about, now I don't know if you've been on YouTube lately, but is Ron Hextall. Somebody made a compilation video of him, and I was like a kid when Hextall was on the team and you were on the team. So to see all the clips edited together, I mean, there's just been no goaltender, I don't think any player like Ron Hextall. What was he like in the locker room? I mean, just talk to me about Ron Hextall a little bit.
First of all, he was a great competitor. He played for the Brandon Wheat Kings in the junior hockey league, so he had to be good. All the good players come from Brandon, and he was very competitive in practice, just the same as he was in hockey games. In the dressing rooms, we left him alone. He was concentrating on what he needed to prepare for before games, but once we got out on the ice, he was a different man. He used to bang the posts. He didn't like anybody in front of him. He used to use his stick fairly well and chop at a few people. He dropped the gloves a few times. He had that high emotion, and he really got the team revved up all the time. But that aside, he changed the game of hockey for goaltenders by the way he handled and shot the puck. And from his era on, now most goaltenders need to be able to handle the puck much better, and we've seen a change in the way goalies are being schooled. So the competitiveness was great. Off the ice, he was very quiet. He had four children and was a great family man, and still is to this day. But when he was on that ice, he was as competitive as Bobby Clark.
Yeah. Now, I'm glad you brought up the change in goaltending. One other thing I wanted to ask you about: goalies today, the pads. They're just giant pads and shoulder pads and the whole thing. And then when you look at the footage when you played, I think of like a Pete Peters or a Sean Burke, the stand-up goalies. Do you think that it's harder to score on goalies today, or do you think, the offense evolved with the goalies and it's just the same that it was anytime?
It's probably a little bit different because defense tend to be a little bit quicker and faster, and goalies have bigger equipment, but also it's just like in the game of golf. The technology has improved. If you look at the one-piece sticks, the way guys can shoot the puck today and really fire it, you've got a bit of an advantage there. The players are fast, and there are a lot more power plays, it seems, during the regular season. So guys that are good on the power play are going to get a lot of points because no matter how big the equipment is and how good the goaltenders are, they're always moving from side to side, and rebounds, and those opportunities are where guys will score a lot of goals. So I think that maybe the equipment is a little bit bigger and better protection, but at the same time, the goaltenders that used to be stand-up played the angles very well and also could do a very good job of stopping the puck. So I think there's more power plays today where players will score more goals, and as a result of maybe not getting as many first-shot goals, but there are a lot of rebounds out there.
Now, the NHL has announced that they're going to do some more outdoor games this year. Not just the Winter Classic. Now, I don't know the schedule. I haven't quite looked at it. I don't know how many they're going to do. I just know they're going to do more. Do you like this for the NHL, or do you think the Winter Classic was a special, New Year's Day thing that might be cheapened a little bit this year?
I think I like the Winter Classic, especially since the Flyers had it a couple of years ago, and I was able to participate with the alumni, and also the Flyers were in it in Boston a few years before. I thought it was really a neat experience for the NHL and for the viewership, but also at the same time, I think that they're seeing such a success with minor league teams, university teams, high school teams, and everybody utilizing the ice facilities during that 2-week period that they've expanded it to having 4 or 5 outdoor games this year. So I think that the Winter Classic is always going to be the main show. But having it in other places, especially the Canadian cities, the people are looking forward to it, and it's just adding more excitement to the game of hockey, and it's giving the game of hockey more press, which in the long run I think is the best thing for it.
I agree with that. I mean, the more people watching, the better. Now, that alumni game you brought up, I remember that, like it was yesterday. I remember thinking that Eric Lindros, he could still be playing today. Do you agree with that, the way he was playing in that game?
I think it was nice that Lindros came back because he hadn't really been back in Philadelphia for a while, and the fans really appreciated the way that he played here and the way that he did come back for the Winter Classic. If you look at the way that Lindros and Leclerc were playing in that Winter Classic, you've got to also remember that the guys that are playing in that are also 40 and 50 and 60 years old, so they can still look a little bit faster.
Okay,
but
yeah.
I played against those two guys for a few years, and their size alone is tremendous. They're very difficult to stop because they can skate well, they could go to the net, they were big and strong, and it was really great to see them playing for the Flyers alumni, and really they added a lot to that game.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you talked about, I'm assuming you talked about when you played for the North Stars?
Yes, I played for the North Stars against them, and then with Hartford when I finished up with the Hartford Whalers.
Okay, what kind of a town was it Minneapolis or St. Paul?
It was in the old Met Center, which is now torn down. It's the Mall of America there now, and actually Minnesota, they left to go to Dallas, and that's when I went to Hartford. But then they built a new arena down in the center of city, and the Wild was the new team that they started there. So I was in the old Met Center when I was there from '91 to '93.
Right. What kind of a hockey town was that? Because I imagine, because it's close to Canada, there's a lot of excitement around it. But the Flyers never really play the Wild, so you never get to see their fans really. What kind of a hockey town is it?
Well, Minnesota is almost like Canada, where the fans are very passionate. I think that their high school hockey is one of the biggest promoted sports, and is huge there, and along with their university hockey, and they have a tremendous following for that. When I first went there, the North Stars weren't winning that much, so there weren't as many fans at the first part of the season, but by the end, when we were in the playoffs and going to the Stanley Cup Finals, that place was jam-packed, and it was like Philadelphia, where the fans were passionate and behind you all along, and it kind of continued like that for a couple of years after.
There's no doubt, but the only difference between that is that even if the Flyers were, losing and having a losing season, the fans would still be there, and you can't say that about many hockey towns, right?
Well, that's true. The Flyer fans have been absolutely fabulous, win or lose, but Mr. Snyder always does such an unbelievable job of making sure that he tries to put the right team that can win the Stanley Cup every single year. They get some of the greatest young talent, and they've always got a team that has a chance to win the Stanley Cup.
Right. I'm going to shift gears a little bit here. because I've always wondered this. Never really got a chance to ask a professional athlete this. But, you know, you played in the early 90s, and let's say Sega Genesis NHLPA 93 came out. Was it exciting to have a caricature in a video game, or did you, you know, not even pay attention to that?
I didn't really pay too much attention to that. Although my son now, if he was a little younger when I was playing, he probably would have enjoyed that. But you know, I think it's cool, and I think it's nice that that's another form of promoting the game of hockey, getting out there, making it interactive for children, getting them excited about hockey, and promoting your brand. So you know, I look at it, the overall picture of things, of how it can help the big picture for the business of hockey. And hockey's grown over the years, especially worldwide, where every country now is sending a lot of athletes to the NHL because that's the best league in the world.
Absolutely. Now, you touched on this a little earlier about social media and, you know, people taking pictures of players when they're out and stuff. Evander Kane got into a little bit of trouble this week because he tweeted about Chris Bosh of the Miami Heat, and his tweet was something to the effect of, he looked like a fairy going to the rim. You know, whether you agree or disagree with that is irrelevant. My question to you is, you know, should professional athletes be careful what they say on social media, or, you know, do you think that there should be an outlet for players to, you know, speak their mind?
I think it's always good for somebody to speak their mind, and it's talking a little bit about a different sport, and you're interacting with your fans, and you know, all of the people that really understand the value of social media and how it can brand themselves and it can promote themselves. If they're not saying what they feel and just have generic thoughts, nobody's going to listen. So sometimes it's kind of interesting to see what they're feeling and what they're saying, although, you know, sometimes they can overstep their bounds a little bit and get in a little trouble, but you know, that's how they get recognized.
You know, I'm really glad to hear you say that, because, you know, I'm one of those guys who, like, I watch a Flyers game, then I watch the post game, and then I go to the website and I watch the extra interviews that they have, and it's just like, it doesn't matter if it's game 1, game 82 in the playoffs. Like 90% of the interviews are the same. Like, yeah, you know, we went hard to the net, guys picked up the loose pucks in front. It was great. You know, it's just the same thing over and over again. So to me, it's like refreshing to hear a player say something a little off color and, you know, speak his mind, or even talk about what they're doing in off season. You know, I just think it's good. It adds more awareness to the game, and you know, just shows the players on a human level.
It does, but I think when you're talking about your teammates and the game of hockey, you have to be guarded. That's why you have your captains and alternates that are very good with dealing with the press and dealing with the players. Every once in a while, you get some colorful guys. Look at Jeremy Roenick. I mean, he'd speak his mind. Chris Pronger would speak his mind, and a number of guys speak their mind, and you still get, you know, some good sound bites from them, but you know, I think they have to be a little bit more guarded when it's you know, game to game, and you know, the guys are, you're kind of in the moment at the time, and a little careful of what they do say.
Right. Now, last thing, Brian, bit of a disappointing year for the Flyers. You know, you could point to a lot of things. I actually don't think you can point to goaltending for once. But in your eyes, what do you think the Flyers need to do to get where Chicago and Boston are right now?
Well, first of all, I think that they need a better leadership in the room, because they were too inconsistent all year long. It really doesn't matter who your line mates are, and if you get switched around, I think that you've got to be more control of your team, and that's where a player like Giroux, who is young, is going to learn to be like a Bobby Clark, where he's going to have to take care of his own end a little bit better, and he can't afford to be a minus player. He has to be a plus player for his club if he's going to be the captain. And that sometimes that takes a year or two to understand that. He's such a fabulous player. He can score a lot of points, but sometimes getting scored against doesn't help the matter. So I think that he'll get a little bit better. I think defensively, they had a lot of injuries back on defense this year. They just picked up Mark Streit, so that should be a veteran player that can be another calming influence back on the blue line. I think they've got a couple of good goaltenders right now, and they've got a very talented and tough team to play against. It's just that consistency is needed. And that's where you need a couple of your veteran players to stand up and to be able to score the key goals in third periods or to make the good defensive plays when you need it.
All right, perfect. Now, hopefully this time next year, we'll be singing a different tune. Brian Propp, I'm so happy, you were the 50th guest here on JoeyRitter.com. People can check you out at brianpropp.com. Follow you on Twitter at Gaffal26. Can we get a Gaffal before we...
There's a big Gaffal for story number 50.
Yes. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Joey. I appreciate it.
You got it.